And what was the process like for recording the vocals?
As far just overall, when it was time to cut vocals, we went through a whole process of trying to find vocal mics for Chris. And once again, I had a very specific idea of how I wanted the vocals to sound, and it involved proximity. Like, he had to get right up on the microphone, which sadly ruled out about 99% of the world's microphones. Because obviously most vocalists will sing, relatively speaking, a decent distance from microphones. I personally don't like that, and I never have. I just prefer this kind of proximity, because I want to pick up every little detail of what a vocalist is doing. And with Chris's voice, it was so powerful that most of the diaphragms of microphones, like a really nice U47 or a 251, they just go like when he starts singing into that. Or maybe it would sound great when he's in one range, but then when he goes into screaming, it changes completely. So we couldn't find a microphone that could handle everything. So after testing a multitude of microphones, I settled on a U67 that the studio had for his quiet parts, and a U47 FET that had been modified by Klaus Heine for his screaming. And it worked. But he had to do all his screaming and his normal singing completely separately, which isn't good for performance. And on top of that, I had the engineer create these ridiculous signal chains for both microphones. Like, I think it was like 4 EQs and 4 compressors on each mic. Something ridiculous, right? So, but I was going for something, and, whatever. Everyone thought I was nuts, but fine. We did it, and I didn't care. And we did the first 4 songs like that, because we were doing them in batches of 4. But then when it came time to do the rest of the record, it occurred to me that this was an exercise in futility, because more than anything, it was driving Chris crazy, because he couldn't do a complete vocal performance. It's nice because when you listen to his vocals now on the record, you can't tell which songs were cut that way and which weren't, which is good. But I was like, I need to get like a solid vocal performance from this guy, if only not to like waste a whole bunch of time and to not frustrate him. So we went through the microphone test again and tried like some of the same mics that we tried before. They all sucked. And it just occurred to me at that point that we should try microphones that had flat responses to them, because the ones that had more character, it was too much character. It just didn't work with Chris. So I got a Sanken CU41, a B&K, I think 4007, a couple of others, and the Neumann U87, which is it's a microphone that I think a lot of people swear by, but up till that point I'd never used one on a vocal because I couldn't stand them. I just don't like the way they sound on vocals. They've never sounded good to any vocalist, and that was the mic that made the cut. Hands down, he could navigate through quiet parts and loud parts on it. He could sing right up on it. I mean, he wound up destroying the diaphragms on the microphones. He literally destroyed them. Like, we had to buy new diaphragms for the studio. Had 5 U87s, and we had to buy new diaphragms for all of them. That's how quickly he destroyed them, because his voice was so powerful. But I was also able to change the signal path, and just went into a 1073, a Neve 1073, out into a Yuri 1176, and then into a GML 8200, just to kind of dial in a little bit of top, and that was it. It was a very simple vocal signal, very basic. Then we got him out in the room and started him singing, and it was funny because I started to notice that he seemed incredibly uncomfortable, and it just occurred to me, like, Chris was an expert at making his own demos. So why not put him in the control room and have him do all the recording himself? So we moved everything into the studio. We set him up in front of the console, gave him the microphone. I showed him how to operate the Studer 827, how to arm, disarm tracks, how to move stuff around the patch bay. We set the microphone up so it was directly behind the NS10s, which we flipped out of phase, so there'd be no low end hitting the microphone. Obviously, if it hits the null point on the microphone, because it's in cardioid, you're not picking up. You don't get a whole lot of bleed that way. And it was great because we A-B'd what the bleed was like when he was in the other room wearing headphones versus the speakers being out of phase and no headphones. Bleed was actually less in the control room. Wow. It was great. And I just said to him, "You're on your own, pal. We're not going to be in the room with you. You have the con. Best of luck. Do as many vocal takes as you can. And when you feel like you got the song, just come get me and we'll start comping." And I remember the first day he did that, he just came down to the lounge where we were hanging out. He was like all out of breath from singing. He was like, "I'm never singing anyway again. This is incredible." He was so happy. It was great.
To watch the full video, click the link below and don't forget to subscribe.